Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 4 of Ultimate Exotics, the supercar review series for the vehicles that are featured on GT6. And in this episode we're featuring a vehicle which arguably runs a very fine line between super sports car and supercar. Now for the sake of this series I am classifying this vehicle as a supercar. And a strong argument can be made that it is a supercar, but at the same time an argument could be made that it's a super sports car rather than a full-on supercar, and I'm not necessarily saying that I would disagree with that argument. However, as I said, for the sake of the series, we are classifying this vehicle based on its performance and its marketing as a supercar. It is, of course, the hugely popular McLaren MP4-12C. Now, this car is important in many ways for McLaren. It marked the return of McLaren to the super exotic category. It was their first production vehicle since the McLaren F1, and what a legacy that car left, regarded by many people as being not just the best supercar ever made, but by some as being the best car ever made. So the MP4 had a lot to live up to. Now, what McLaren decided to do with the 12C was very clever. They did not make it to live up to the F1. It was not designed to replace the F1, because if they had tried to do that, the public would not have liked that. What they did instead was did something completely new. It's a completely different style of supercar. The McLaren is a very mechanical, drivers-based car, whereas the MP4 is more a technical, computer-age supercar that makes real full use of the modern technology, which of course the McLaren F1 did in its time, but the MP4 is very much a car of today. Now, in terms of what it's capable of, it's a very strong all-round supercar. It's got a 3.8 litre twin-turbo engine, which is significantly smaller in capacity than many of the other supercars on the game, but the engine is very, very responsive to tuning. It produces 973 horsepower fully tuned and 634 pound-feet of torque, and combine that with its very modest weight of 1,105 kilos, and the resulting power-to-weight ratio is a very impressive 881 horsepower per tonne. Now, incidentally, this car sits at 658 pp when fully tuned, which for a supercar and for a road car in general is very high. Because if you think about it, you can have a full-on Le Mans prototype in that category of PP with very minimal power loss. So for a road car to be classified that high, it needs to be a bit special. Now, thankfully for the McLaren, it is a bit special. As I said early on in this video, it's a very strong all-round supercar. Top speed is very impressive for its power, around the 290 mph region. The acceleration is very strong, even off the line, which is impressive for a rear-wheel drive vehicle. And the handling is very sharp and really perfect for competitive track racing, both in terms of sheer lap times and also actual racing. Now, while we're on the point of handling, the handling is one of the things that you need to bear in mind if you're a potential MP4-12C buyer. Now, it's been said by some people, including an Evo magazine test driver, that the MP4-12C was the best handling car he had ever driven, which in real life is fair enough. On the game, however, I have to disagree with that. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad handling car, certainly not, but neither is it a vehicle which you can just jump in with no experience and win races. The MP4 is a professional specialist vehicle. It requires practice to get the best out of, and you could say that any vehicle does, which is true, but most supercars don't take as long to get used to as the MP4, and most of them are pretty well responsive to most tuning methods, whereas with the McLaren you have to be very specific and selective with how you choose to tune the car. In my current setup that I'm using in this video, I'm running a significant ballast over the front wheels and nowhere near the full power, because it's a very twitchy vehicle. The front end feels very light, which isn't surprising for a mid-engine rear drive car, and although it's certainly not a bad handling vehicle, it's a bit unpredictable. it almost feels, in my opinion, that the car wants to do its own thing. It doesn't really want to do what you want it to do. Now, if you're into cars like that, you'll probably enjoy the MP4, but I don't. I don't like cars that are trying to do their own thing. I like cars that are reactive rather than trying to decide where they want to go. And this car is certainly one of those vehicles. It has a twitchy front end. It's very tail happy, surprisingly, especially in low speed corners. And although I'm not saying it's a bad car, far from it, it's definitely not a car that I use that often. Now, I'm not a fan of really any of the new shape McLarens. I'm not a fan of McLaren in general, but I have huge respect for the F1, and I respect the MP4, the P1, etc. I just don't really like them that much, and in the case of these cars, it's mainly down to the looks. To me, it looks too much like a part spin special. Just, it's a bit of Lotus, a bit of Mercedes, a bit of McLaren, a bit of Maserati, a bit of Lambo. It doesn't really have its own unique look. But obviously that's personal preference, and I'm not trying to sway you guys either way in that regard. What I'm trying to say is, if you do plan on buying this vehicle, be aware that the handling is not the easiest car to drive, or, to be specific, not the easiest to get the best out of. Now, if you are looking to buy one, that's a good point for you, because the price on this car is very good. It's 225,000 credits, which significantly undercuts many of the other supercars in the game. And overall, it is a great value for money vehicle in terms of what you get for that price. So overall, it's certainly a great car, but bear in mind, you need practice with it. So that's it for this episode. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.